What do you think God makes of our $4.26 a week? We're the richest generation to have ever lived on the planet. Do you think God really wants us to spend it all on ourselves and give away just $4.26 a week? I think we need to pay attention to what the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. He's speaking to the Corinthian Christians about sharing their wealth with the Christians in Judea. The background to his teaching is that Judea had been struck by a terrible famine. And famine means people are hungry, they're malnourished, they're susceptible to disease, their children are dying, their futures are literally disintegrating before their eyes. So the churches outside Judea committed to a multi-year support program for the Judean Christians. And Paul writes 2 Corinthians 8 to encourage the Corinthians to keep on giving. And this is part of what he has to say. Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you're hard pressed, but that there might be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. The goal is equality. Paul gets the kind of world God wants. God wants communities where everyone has enough to meet their needs, where everyone is welcome and treated with justice, where everyone knows and follows Jesus. And he knows those sorts of communities will only come into being if people share their resources. So Paul calls on the Corinthians to be generous in their giving. At the moment, he says, they have plenty and the Judeans are in need. So Paul's logic's this. If you Corinthians share some of your plenty with the Judeans, you'll still have enough to live decently. But the Judeans will also be able to live decently. I can remember the famines in Ethiopia in the 1980s. Those terrible images that appeared on our TV screens of Ethiopian women barely able to walk, emaciated children. I remember the concert Bob Geldof organised to raise money for famine relief. Well, 20 years later, Bob Geldof walks onto the stage at another concert and he reminds the audience of the Ethiopian famine. As he speaks, there's a giant screen behind him, and on that screen is the picture of a baby girl who's a victim of the Ethiopian famine. Her cheeks are gaunt, her eyes are glazed. Bob Geldof points to the picture and he says, "See this little girl? She had 10 minutes to live 20 years ago. But because we did a concert, last week she did her agricultural exams in the school she goes to in the Ethiopian highlands. She's here tonight." And out on stage walks a healthy, radiant 20-year-old Ethiopian woman. It was a spine-tingling moment. And every time I watch that video, it reminds me that generosity changes lives. But here's the challenging thing. Did you notice that 2 Corinthians 8 doesn't call only for generosity? It calls for equity. It calls for a world where those with plenty are committed to sharing enough of their plenty to ensure everyone lives decently. I'm not sure we're there. I think in the church we're committed to generosity. But don't you think that equality takes us into another realm altogether? Doesn't it call for an extravagant generosity, where we dramatically pare back our discretionary spending so that we can share with those in need?